I'm Kurt Von Diest for RGG EDU, and we're retouching cinnamon twists. So here we have 2 captures of cinnamon twists, and in Rob's notes he's noted that 103 is his hero. This is his preference. And 102 has a brighter surface and nice reflection in the top of the coffee. So there's just a little bit more highlight in the top of the coffee there. So we're going to blend these 2 exposures. It's going to select them both and Command D in Capture 1 to process and open them up in Photoshop. Wait for the second one to come up here. And then, so 103 is our hero. Drag this out of the tabs. It's easier to get at them, not in tabs, to combine them. Okay, so I have my 2 files of cinnamon twist open in Photoshop. 103 is our hero exposure. 102 is our secondary exposure, where we like really the reflection in the top of the coffee. So I'm going to take our secondary exposure and drag it into our primary exposure, holding down the Shift key, and go ahead and close the other one so I remember which one I'm working on. And I'm just going to add a layer mask. Most of the time I show adding a layer mask and then Command I to flip it to black. We do that over and over and over again. There's actually a shortcut that takes one little step out of that. Before I add the layer mask, if I hold down my Option key, when I add my layer mask, Photoshop goes ahead and makes it black for me because it knows that most of the time when I'm adding a layer mask, I only want to paint it in a very small area. And so starting with a black layer mask is helpful. So I'm going to paint white to reveal that secondary exposure on the top of my coffee. And holding down the Shift key, I can see what other areas of the image I might like better with that exposure. No, I think that the something about the shadow on the right side of that coffee is nicer in the secondary exposure. Just a little more depth to that shadow adds in just a little more contrast to the image. Maybe just split the difference down here. I'm just masking that in ever so slightly. Rid of my history there. And I think that's nice. So now I'm just going to move on to doing my cleanup work. And I have my clone stamp tool, and I've made a blank layer with my sample current and below, which is going to allow me to clone and keep the new information on my blank layer rather than duplicating the background. And I'm just going to clone out anything that really catches my eye, is confusing, or just looks dirty. Anything that shouldn't be there. Clean up some of the crumbs on this plate. I don't want to remove them all because these cinnamon twists are really crunchy and flaky, and that's why they're good. So I'm not removing all of them. I'm just removing any that just really catch my eye. It seems like the darker ones catch my eye. And the lighter ones I'm going to leave. So some of these darker ones I'm going to take out. And some I'm just going to take out part way, make them a little bit lighter. Something about this handle on the mug, the highlight on this edge of the mug blends with the background, and so it looks like this handle just ends and there's a little gap Might just kind of clarify that the two connect by removing that harder edge. Just moving some of those tones in so it just looks like it connects a little bit more. Now some of these grooves in the table surface, it's really nice that it has this nice texture, but this feels a little complicated to me and is fighting with some of the twists in the cinnamon. So I'm just going to simplify that a little bit, again with a low opacity clone stamp, and I'm just going to lighten in some of the darker sections of this wood texture just to make a small move to simplicity, particularly along the edge of the image. Just like the white crumbs, but these that are right up against the edge of the image on the end of the frame are catching my eye, so I'm going to take those out. And some of these that are over the highlight on the plate create just little shadows. I think simplifying those might be nice. Okay. So now we'll look at adding just a little bit of contrast, just to kind of finish this image off. Add just a little depth to the shadows and a little punch to the highlights. This image is really bright and airy, so I'm not going to do any sort of vignette that darkens. I want to keep this nice and high key. Look at brightening up my midtones just a little bit. And again, I'm going to flip my mask to black, Command-I. I'm going to use this just to brighten up the ends of the cinnamon sticks. And the coffee as well. Small move. Just because I cannot help myself, I'm going to come back in here and take out this one little crumb that's right on the edge of the plate. Something about its placement is really catching my eye. We have a lot of nice crumbs on the table on the other corner of the plate, so I don't think missing that one is going to matter too much, and I think it's just going to clean up this edge. Now hold down Option key and see my before and after, and see that here we've really just made a very small move just to brighten up the colors, brighten up the contrast a little bit, remove some imperfections, and get a little nicer reflection in the top of this coffee. As a finishing touch, I might just bring in a tiny bit more tone into the very top of this cinnamon twist. That one's starting to seem just a little bright. Add another curve, so it just brings that down ever so slightly. I only want to do that a little bit because, again, this image is very high key and we want to stay true to that. I feel like maybe the front of the cinnamon twists just feel a little redder than the rest of the image. Maybe they're just a little saturated. So I'm going to look at making just a small correction for that. I'll do that with the hue and saturation layer adjustment. If I, in the hue and saturation, rather than editing my master, which is all the colors in the file, I'm going to leave that alone and just go into my reds. And I'm just going to pull that down a little bit just to desaturate the reds ever so slightly. Make the adjustment a little bit stronger than I like because I can, it's really about how I mask it in that's going to determine the final look. So I'll flip that mask to black and then paint in this adjustment slowly, taking out some of that red cast on the front. Just seemed a little bit more intense than the other parts of the cinnamon twist. I think that's a nice correction. And with that, I think we're ready to save this image and move on to our next image.